Okay, so welcome. This is the flipped recording for EDU 40004, assignment 1. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to go into the assignments tab, click on assignment 1 essay, and let's take a look. We have a word limit of 1500 words plus or minus 10%, weighting of 30%. Due date is 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Monday, the 15th of April, which is week 6. Let's take a look at the assignment overview. The assignment task requires you to write a reflective essay discussing diversity and difference in relation to social justice in early childhood education. You'll examine diversity and difference in relation to social justice and discuss how you can challenge any related stereotypes and biases. Be they examples you've witnessed firsthand, discuss with others, or in fact, hold as your own. Challenge your own and others' bias and assumptions will assist you in further considering strategies that can support children and their families within early childhood settings. Now, you'll notice that there's lots of words in there that relate very, very much to even just the first couple of weeks of the unit already. We've got diversity and difference. We've also got bias and stereotyping, which is this week's focus. And so you'll notice that it's really the activities each week are really well aligned with this particular assessment and in fact the others. So the task is assessing your ability to demonstrate that you meet the following unit learning outcomes, critically evaluate categories of difference of diversity and difference, and critically reflect on to identify and challenge your own and others' bias and stereotypes from an informed and principled perspective, and we'll look at that in a moment. So the assignment details. You're required to write a 1500-word essay that argues a rationale for why social justice is important to consider in order to support children and families. Now it says use these guiding prompts to consider how to structure and frame your essay. So let's be very clear. If you structure your essay according to these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dot points, you can't go far wrong. Make sure that this is the structure you use. You can have headings for each of these dot points and address each of them in turn. And they're ordered so that they actually kind of work quite well together. So once you discuss the other, it's a fairly natural progression into the next one. So this is your structure. Use it. First of all, define social justice, including what social justice is and how it broadly links to diversity and difference. So this is something we've done right in the first week. We've looked at social justice and we've linked it to diversity and difference. We're looking to get our definitions, and once the definitions is clear, we can then go on to discuss the various elements and concepts involved. So that's fairly straightforward. Second dot point. Discuss social justice principles and their regulations and policies relevant to early childhood education in the Australian context. And you'll notice that this links very closely to the second activity in week 1, where you've looked at the social justice principles outlined by rules in the readings, and then looked at the various regulations and policies. And in this particular case, we're looking at regulations and policies that are relevant to early childhood education. And what you're going to do in this essay is examine or discuss the fact that the regulations and policies involve the principles of social justice, but also try to identify whether or how well they reflect the principles that they suggest that they represent. And in particular, you can draw from rules here, how well do the regulations and policies reflect the principles identified by rules in his writing. Third dot point, discuss why an understanding of social justice and the broader principles and implications are important when working with children. So here we're examining why we're even talking about social justice. What's it got to do with teaching children in early education? So the broader principles and implications and why it's important when working with children. Of course, this is where it progresses on then from looking at the regulations and policies and applying them and see how relevant they are and how therefore relevant the principles of social justice are to the early education environment. The fourth dot point, Outline some of the broader issues and challenges to implementing social justice in practice, including discrimination, bias, attitudes relating to categories of diversity and difference, week 2 and 3, that may affect children and families. Where possible, discuss some of the underlying factors that may affect both children and your attitudes and behaviours. So this is looking at week 2 now, particularly. It says 2 and 3, yes, the activity in week 2 where we're looking at the broader issues and challenges. We're talking, therefore, about stereotyping and how this impacts on social justice, how discrimination impacts on social justice, how bias and attitudes relating to categories of diversity and difference impact on social justice. They are the barriers to social justice. So that's what we're talking about there. The last dot point we have here is discuss how theoretical perspectives may help you to challenge your own and others' biases and stereotypes or in developing an anti-bias approach. Provide examples where appropriate to deepen your argument. I want to make this really, really clear. Theoretical perspectives are addressed in week 2, so this week's readings, and you'll notice that they discuss postmodernism, post-structuralism, there's feminist post-structuralism, and there are others as well. These are the theoretical perspectives that I want you to be using and discussing in your essay. We are not talking about learning theories. We're not talking about Piaget. We're not talking about Vygotsky or any other writers on learning theories. It's an entirely different subject. For the context of this essay and for this unit, the theoretical perspectives relate to those which describe and explain the structure of our society and help us understand why discrimination exists, why bias exists, and why attitudes related to categories of diversity and difference exist. They're explanations for the structure of our society and for the differences that underlie it. So they're the ones who I want you to look at. There are those that are mentioned in the learning materials and in the readings, and there are others that you can research as well and find that might help you to look at your examples. So you're going to provide examples where appropriate to deepen your argument, looking at examples from your own experiences or those that you've heard of, and find a theoretical perspective that is appropriate to those examples and helps you to understand them and therefore challenge the bias and discrimination and stereotyping that you're discussing there. You may find it useful to consider these questions to assist you in your ideas. And generally throughout your essay, these are the 2 points I want you to be focusing on drawing out in your discussion. So firstly, as an early childhood educator, why is it important to have an understanding of social justice? That needs to be really, really clear, and that links to dot point 3. And the last part is how can theoretical perspectives assist in challenging bias and stereotypes. So you're talking about the theoretical perspectives, you're discussing examples, and then using those to challenge bias and stereotypes, and then bring that out throughout your essay as well. Now, as this is a reflective essay, so when you're using your own examples and you might be discussing your own bias and your own stereotypes, that's where you're being reflective and thinking about how you think and how other people think. Because it's a reflective essay, you may use examples, it says, from your own other experiences. Because of this, you're likely to use first person, and that's great. Use third person when you're talking more generally and just in discussing the principles and discussing diversity and difference and so forth, and when describing the theoretical perspectives and explaining them. But then when you're reflecting on specific examples, that's where you'll use first person. Now, the fact that you're using first person doesn't mean you don't need to be citing and referencing appropriately as well. Now then, as this is an academic essay, an introduction, including a strong thesis statement of what you plan to discuss and conclusion are expected. So my expectation is quite clear here. A good introduction which describes what you are going to discuss. You then have your main body where you discuss those various elements and the dot points I've just outlined. And then your conclusion should reflect your discussion and draw it together. Basically just effectively restate your main points. Now that this shaded area here, this is a new section to each unit or each assignment includes this section, and this is new this teaching period. I'll just read it to you. Throughout your teaching journey, you will be required to use your relevant national and/or state or territory curriculum to help you build capability in this area and to help further prepare you for placement. Here at Swinburne Online, we allow you to choose whether you would like to use the relevant national and/or state or territory curriculum in your assignments. So you can use either, any. For further information specific to your assignments for this specific unit, please seek advice from your ELA and/or your unit coordinator. So you can use any, you can use the Australian curriculum or any of the state or territory curriculums. I have put a Padlet on the resources thread in the discussion board. So each of the group discussion boards, in the top area where the pinned discussions are, I've now included extra resources, and in there's a Padlet which has an explanation on how to use and access the various curricula that we're talking about here. So go onto there, have a look. Many of you I know are used to using those. Some of them are less, some of you are less so. So use those resources if you feel they're necessary. Additional resources as well. We have a link there to how to submit assessments and a link to an essay writing guide, reflective writing, and how to use Turnitin. Additionally, obviously there's an APA style guide as usual, which you can use to help you with citing and referencing your work. Submission details. As usual, the assignment will be submitted via Turnitin. You'll find the relevant submission point below here. Assignment support. Don't forget that in addition to myself, I obviously provide discipline-specific content advice. You can access the 24/7 draft writing service from Studiosity as well. There's a link to do so. Now let's have a look at the assignment criteria. So you are being assessed specifically in 3 areas. First of all, your knowledge and understanding of principles of social justice. Secondly, your capacity to challenge biases and stereotypes from an informed and principled perspective. And thirdly, your academic expression. Let's look at the first one of those, your knowledge and understanding of the principles of social justice. This links very, very much to week one and a little bit to week 2. So for a pass, the principles of social justice are explained in relation to diversity and difference. Most of you have done this already in your activity. For a credit, principles of social justice are clearly discussed in relation to diversity and difference, the little bit extra here, and early childhood. So it needs to be specifically related to, or your discussion needs to draw out and be specifically related to the early childhood context. For distinction, in-depth discussion of the principles of social justice in relation to diversity in early childhood, with clear identification of the policies and regulatory framework. So this is linking the second activity from week 1, which most of you have done, so you're looking, as I've said already, one of the dot points is you're linking the policies and regulatory frameworks to the principles, how well are they reflected and within that early childhood setting. For a high distinction, social justice principles, policies and frameworks are critically examined in relation to diversity and difference and early childhood context. And again, this is where you're drawing out that critical analysis of how well they reflect the documents might reflect the principles, such as those by rules, but then also again how well the policies might reflect those principles as well. So actually in practice, what are the policies, and do they draw out and do they reflect and use those principles of social justice? Moving on to the second area where you're being assessed is your capacity to challenge biases and stereotypes from an informed and principled perspective. 40% of the overall mark. For a pass, bias and stereotypes are identified and discussed in relation to an informed and principled perspective. Fairly straightforward. That's something you're doing in your activity this week, in week 2. For a credit, bias and stereotypes are clearly discussed and challenged in relation to an informed and principled perspective. Okay, so a bit more clarity there. And remember, our principled perspective is our theoretical perspective. So our post-structuralism, postmodernism, feminist post-structuralism, etc. Okay, that's the principled perspective we're using there. But for a distinction, biases and stereotypes are examined and challenged in relation to an informed and principled perspective. Discussion is in depth and diverse dimensions are considered. So the diverse dimensions, there are not necessarily black and white issues here. When we're talking about, they're not necessarily clear cut. Things don't always work like that in real life, and there are lots of grey areas, and that's something you need to draw out in your discussion and demonstrate. Biases and for high distinction, biases and stereotypes are critically examined. Again, that's that critical analysis and challenge in relation to an informed and principled perspective with clear reference to relevant theoretical sources. Finally, your academic expression. Let's just take a look at the high distinction. The ideas are presented in a well-structured and logical order, leading to an integrated and highly cohesive essay. If you follow the structure already outlined with those dot points, you'll be fine. Writing is concise and clear. References embedded expertly into the flow of information and ideas with a well-managed balance of paraphrasing and quotation. So how well you embed your academic literature and where you use that to guide your discussion. And also, I strongly suggest that you use plenty of paraphrasing as opposed to quotation. Quotation very limited. So most of your work should be based on paraphrasing, and the reason for that is it demonstrates a much deeper understanding of the academic literature, and which is what you're trying to achieve in your essay. You're trying to demonstrate that to me, that you understand it and are then applying it. Any errors that remain in the work do not distract from the overall quality of the essay or of the meaning communicated. All external sources are referenced according to APA referencing conventions as per usual. Okay. And that's really pretty much it, guys. It's a fairly straightforward essay. As I say, usual essay structure, introduction, main body, conclusion. If you have any questions, if you're unsure about anything, particularly the theoretical perspectives, then please, I urge you to ask a question on the discussion board. Let's get that out there. Let's see everyone asking those questions so that we can all learn from them. That's the purpose of it. If you're unsure about which theoretical perspective to use, again, ask that question. You can use your peers for this. This is what I want to talk about. Is this an appropriate theoretical perspective for my example? Does it draw it out, and does it help us understand my particular example, etc. So good luck with that, guys. Next week we will be having or in the coming week we will be having our collaborate session, 7:30 on Wednesday. Please, love to see as many of you there as possible. But please, now you've got to this point, you must have listened to this, so this is really good. And so you come armed with any of your questions that you've got following this this flipped recording. So I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday, and enjoy the rest of the weekend and the rest of the week.